We are back. Senators, Twins, baseball, past, present, and future. I'm Ralph Tyko. One of my co-hosts, George Case III, is not with us this evening, but my other one, Ron Rabinovitz, is. Ronnie, how are you,
Hi, Ralph.
sir?
How you doing, buddy?
I'm good. You're healthy this week, and
yes,
things are going along.
I am doing
good.
Well.
We have a terrific guest. David Hubler wrote a book. It's entitled, I don't know what that noise is. 1 second. Here we go. David Hubler wrote a book called The Nats and the Grays, How Baseball in the Nation's Capital Survived World War II and Changed the Game Forever. Whoa, you're on the right show, David.
I think so, yes.
We try to do the Senators, the history of the Senators, and their transformation, really, to the Minnesota Twins in 1961. And we talk a little about the current Twins, what's going on. But as we talked off the air, we're old guys looking for memories and looking to pass stuff on for the future. And your book is terrific.
Thank you.
World War II is a little bit before Ron and I's time.
Right.
How did you come to write the book, get interested in the book, in the content? How did it come about, David?
Well, actually, it was an old Brooklyn Dodger who got me sort of thinking about this book, and I thought of it originally as a novel. But if you remember the great catch that Algie and Frito made against Joe DiMaggio in the World Series, and then
back, said Red Barber.
Yep, right. But he never played another major league game in his life. He didn't make the team the next year. So it began to dawn on me. I was thinking, all of these guys who played in the majors during the war, many of them knew that they were just replacement players. They weren't called that in those days like they were in football and baseball lockouts. But it was just an interesting thought to me that they played in total anonymity. And then they went home to their farms or mine jobs or local jobs in shops and stores in small towns. And that was their one moment of great fame. So I thought about writing a novel, and I picked 1944 because 44 was like the last full year of the war, and players were beginning to return. And I thought, well, gee, what was going on in Washington at the time? Now, I know folks like Paul Dixon have been on the air, and he was one of my mentors, so to speak, in helping me find the direction of where I could get first, primary source material. And, of course, in D.C., you've got also the Library of Congress. Anyway, I chose 1944, as I said, because it was the last full year of the war. And it turned out that it was a very, very interesting year. We can talk about that later, but that was the genesis for the book. I did write it, and I've recently rewritten it simply because I've made some major changes. But the point was that I could not find a publisher for it. Then so my thinking was, well, maybe a local D.C. publisher in the area would be more interested in a local history, even if it was fiction. And I got in touch with the folks at Roman and Littlefield. They're over in Lanham, Maryland. And the editor said she really liked the way it was written, and it was a very interesting story, but they don't do fiction. So she suggested, how would you like to do a book about the war years, but expand it to all the war years, concentrating on D.C.? So Christine Kaczynski was the editor, and I'm indebted to her for sort of pinpointing how the nonfiction book would be concentrated. And so it starts.
So the book itself, although initially planned as a novel, becomes real.
Yes.
It becomes real. Huh, that's great. Wow.
Well, yeah, and if I could make this. When I started to write this was going back into the 1990s. Okay, I mean, there's a long gestation period for a book,
right.
Sure.
But the beauty of serendipitously, I was able to get in touch with some of the surviving members of the 44 team who played for Washington, and I interviewed them and recorded the interview. So when it came time to do the nonfiction book, I still had their words on tape. Unfortunately, they had all passed away by then, but I still got some wonderful quotes about what was happening during that year. And interestingly enough, Eddie Yost, who many Washington fans remember, Eddie Yost was a rookie in the 44 season, and unfortunately, he just didn't remember very much about it at all. He said, I was just young, I was like 18, 19, and and then of course he had a long major league career. So what happened in his first year there, a rookie year, he didn't remember much, but he was very gracious, as were the other ball players whom I spoke with. And they were very grateful to be remembered. And that was one of the triggering things that I kept in my mind throughout this entire period. These guys were totally unknown. And
right. Now, George Case, the third, who is George Case's son, the original George Case, who played with the Senators, contributed to this book. And
yes.
You have a relationship with him that really added to the content of the work. Can you address George and tell us, George Sr., and tell us who is a junior himself? The ball player was a junior.
Yes, he was. Yes, George Case Jr. Mm-hmm.
And he was the fastest man in baseball at the time. And
he certainly was, yeah.
George, his son, is incredibly modest when it comes to not only himself, but his dad's accomplishments.
His dad, too, yeah. Yeah, that's true.
And I'd like to know from you how you rated George Case and, how you remembered him in your book.
Yes, I honestly believe, because I was thinking about this, and I've spoken to George the Third
right.
numerous times, and we met. Yes, it does. Just think King George the Third, and we've met a couple of times at various baseball historical meetings. I think his father, had he played a generation later, would have probably been a candidate for the Hall of Fame. Because, for one thing, because of his speed. He led the league in stolen bases, 4 or 5 years in a row. He was an outstanding fielder, and he was really part of that cog in Washington on the team. Now they had a couple of bad years during the war, and they finished second twice, but they never gained the recognition because it was wartime. Baseball was not covered as extensively as, say, the war effort. Many of the stars were off in the war, and the glamour of the sport sort of took a hit during the war. And I think that's one of the reasons why I was so surprised in writing the book how really interesting that period was. So getting back to George the Third, I think his dad really would have been gained much more recognition, even though he does have his name is up there on the it used to be on the Ring of Fame in the old DC Stadium, and it's now on a plaque or something at Nats Park.
Would you guys say that Minnesota has been really good to the Senator memory? I know some expansion teams or or some teams that have switched franchises, such as the New York Giants to San Francisco, have been kept in mind by the new franchise, by the new city. At HET Park, there's wall upon wall of memories of Mel Ott and Willie and all the people playing back in New York, Monty Irvin. Do they do that in Minnesota to honor the senators, the former senators?
I don't believe they do, Ralph. I haven't noticed that. The only ones, of course, that are recognized are the ones that did play it with the Senators and then came over to the Twins, like Harmon Killebrew or Bob Allison, people like that, you know.
Right.
But otherwise,
they don't go back in time for
not so much.
Walter
I don't
Johnson.
think so.
Okay.
No, probably not. I haven't been to the ballpark in Minneapolis, but I'll tell you.
I live in
thing
Minneapolis.
Oh, okay. So I know what well, the only thing I can contribute to that is when I was gathering photos for the book, I called the Twins office, and it was the year that Minnesota hosted the All-Star game. So I didn't expect to get too much in the way of a response, but they were wonderful.
Were they? Good.
Yes, there was a woman there. Actually, I think she was an intern, and I'm sure they had lots of interns scurrying about getting ready for the All-Star game, who sent me a number of photos of the players in their Washington uniforms with the straight W on their cap.
Well, that's wonderful. That's great.
And I was really, truly surprised by that. So I think in that respect, they were very good about it. I don't know.
That's good to hear.
That is good to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Ron, just off the subject, do the Dodgers in L.A. honor the Brooklyn Dodgers as they should?
Yes, they do. They do. Like Campanella and Jackie and people like this, they do. And of course, there were a couple of them that, again, played with Brooklyn and then came over to L.A. But at the end of their careers. But no, they remember like Duke Snider and Campanella and Newcomb and Jackie Robinson and Gilliam, and many of their numbers have been retired. And even Sandy Koufax, who actually started as a Brooklyn Dodger.
Yes.
As did Drysdale, and they were very young when they...
Right. They were very young. Matter of fact, I remember Koufax was pretty wild at one time. He was a bullpen pitcher, and they'd say they're bringing in Sandy Koufax, and I kind of cringed. Oh, my God.
He was
because
wild.
He was pretty wild. He was wild. But, boy, did he get good.
Legend has it that Norm Sherry,
yes, Norm Sherry,
backup catcher, worked with him, and I don't know what he told him, but it certainly was good advice.
He worked in they had two brothers. They were two brothers, Larry and Norm Sherry.
That's right. Yes.
Right.
Larry was a terrific relief pitcher. Won some sort of World Series award. I think it was 59. He won the most valuable player in the World Series, and at that time they were giving out Corvettes. I remember.
That's right.
Had an award. Now I think they still give out cars, but they're not luxury,
No.
Into a Corvette, but
no.
Whatever. What do I want to ask? What do I want to ask David Hubler the most? I want to ask him what contributed to keeping the seasons going during the war. I know there were talks of closing down baseball, and who was responsible for keeping it going?
Well, to my mind, it was Clark Griffith. That's really the nexus of the story. Griffith had met Franklin Roosevelt in 1917 There's a picture of it in the book. It's a well-known picture. It's been used in several volumes of the two of them standing at the flagpole raising the flag in 1917 before the start of the season.
Wow.
And they became close friends. 1917.
This is before World War One.
Well, it's in the middle of World War One.
I mean,
yeah. And
wow.
we hadn't gotten into it. The U.S. was getting ready to get into it. And Griffith at that time was very, very prominent in supporting the doughboys, the troops that went over to France in World War One. He sent baseball equipment for them. And, in fact, there's an interesting little anecdote. He sent a bunch of baseball equipment that he had raised the money for through charities, and he sent it all over on this vessel. The Germans sank the vessel in the Atlantic, and he promptly went ahead and collected more money and sent over another batch. When World War II came, so Griffith was very, very was a typical pro-American patriot. And he did not want to see baseball ended especially during World War II, because by that time he was the owner of the team, and that was his sole source of income. You know, the Crosleys in Cincinnati and the Wrigleys in Chicago, they had baseball was.
They had other things, sure.
Yeah, they had other things.
Right.
So in 42. As the season was beginning, and 41, of course, was a great year for baseball. Williams hit 406. DiMaggio hit 56 straight games. It was a wonderful. The World Series was good. Everyone was interested in baseball at that time in the States. There was no real pro football or NBA, so baseball was the sport. And one of the interesting facets about this was that in 1940, the owners would meet each year in Chicago in December to get set for the next season, and they were gathering at the Palmer House Hotel in Chicago on that Sunday. Some had come in on Saturday. They came in by train, of course, and they were gathering on Sunday. So they got together Sunday meeting, and of course. That was Sunday of Pearl Harbor. So in the terms of playing baseball turned 180 degrees right then and there, because instead of discussing player trades and things, they didn't know what they were going. You know, would there be baseball? So fast forward to 42. The beginning of 42, and I mentioned this friendship between Griffith and FDR as a preface, because what happened subsequently, Kennesaw Mountain Landis, who was had been commissioner since 1920, so he's been 24 years by that time. He was a fixture in Major League Baseball. He hated Roosevelt, and Roosevelt hated him. They didn't see eye to eye on anything. And it's my supposition, as I mentioned in the book, that I believe, so Landis sends a letter in February of 42. He sends a letter to FDR, and he says, you know, look, it's up to you. Basically he's saying, up to you. If you want to continue baseball, okay. If not, we can shut it down. And I think he was hoping that Roosevelt would shut it down, because he could blame the loss of baseball on the president, not on himself. Roosevelt, and here's where his connection with Griffith comes in. I don't believe the president at any time had the time to answer this letter personally. I think he probably had Griffith in. He said, "Hey, take a look at this. Tell me what you think. Give me some ideas. Write up an answer, and we'll send it off to this guy." Because
it's going to be a rubber stamp.
Yeah, he had no use. Right. He had no use for. So, and another reason why I think Griffith had a big hand in this is because Griffith had been a definite opponent of night baseball. He really hated night baseball when Cincinnati introduced it, I think in '38. But anyway. In May of 41, Griffith had his first night game at Griffith Stadium, and it drew 25,000 fans. He had spent $130,000 on lights, so he definitely wanted to continue night baseball. And there's a passage. What transpired was a letter back to Kennesaw Mountain Landers, which is called the Green Light Letter. There's a big blow-up of it in the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, in which Roosevelt says, no, let's continue the game. It's good for morale. It's good for, we'll keep the home fights going. We'll sponsor some war relief exhibitions and things, which he did throughout the war. He was very, very prominent in supporting the war. But he also said, this is in Roosevelt's voice, of course. By the way, you should consider playing more night games. This is Griffith's plug, for more night games. And,
right.
And throughout the war years, he actually did. He wound up with more night games than any other. I'm calling them the Nationals because officially they were the Nationals. They didn't become the Senators again until '56. But the point is that the Nats drew so well during the war years that they finished third overall in attendance during the war years because so many of the games were played at night. And even when the Landers put a limit on the number of games that all the teams could play, Washington got more than the other teams. And even then, what Griffith came up with was twilight baseball, starting the game about 6 o'clock. So it was sort of a day game, but it wasn't, And so the turnstiles were pretty busy during the war years.
I haven't heard that expression in a long time. That was big in the 50s and 60s.
Twilight baseball.
Twilight,
right.
Yeah,
it was.
Because people could come from work.
How they got away from that?
Well, how did they get away from Sunday doubleheaders?
Yeah, right.
We don't see those anymore either.
No.
No. I was going back over the 1962 season with the Mets. They played 23 doubleheaders in 1962, which meaning everybody was playing 23 doubleheaders.
Yeah. Well, in '43 when they finished second, and 45 finished second. Actually, 45 more than 43. The players themselves blamed they lost the season. They lost the pennant by one game at the end of the season. But it was primarily because Griffith had rented the stadium to the Redskins in September. So they had to double up on the number of doubleheaders. And they were playing doubleheaders throughout the month of September, which just, killed the pitchers' arms because they
knocked them out.
And so they wound up losing, but that's what the players blamed it on was the number of doubleheaders. Yeah, all squeezed together in that one. I mean, they played them throughout the course of the season, but it was doubling up on them so that the Redskins could have the stadium. Griffith needed the money. That was, people think he was cheap and tight, but he really wasn't. You talk to you can't talk to the players of that era now, but if you could, they would tell you that he was a very generous man.
Kelvin was a little cheaper than Clark, I think.
Yeah. Oh yeah, much more.
Yeah, much cheaper. Yeah.
One of the players I spoke to who was telling me he was at that time he was a rookie, and he went to Griffith and he said, "Look, I'm making so little money, I can't afford to stay, to rent a room or a place." So Griffith told him to check into a hotel. I'll pay the bill. When you find a place that you can afford, just let me know. And he did that.
How do you like that? Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
terrific.
It's nice for me to hear good things about Calvin Griffith because
Clark.
Right.
Yeah.
Clark.
Yeah.
Because Ronnie and I have agreed that he was not a particularly progressive person in terms of bringing blacks into the organization.
Correct.
Although
That's right.
he was incredibly ahead of his time with Latin American players, Cuba in
Yes.
particular.
Yes.
Yes. Camilo Pascual and Ramos
yeah.
and a host of others.
Absolutely. Right.
So nice to hear he did something good for the overall.
Well, see, now that's another area where you go back to his inability to earn money except for the team. He was earning money by renting the stadium on Sundays to the Homestead Grays. That's the Grays from the Nats and the Grays, and they were
from the Negro League
team.
right?
Yeah,
yeah, right.
And he knew. First of all, he was very, very smart when it came to baseball and business. That's why they called him the Old Fox. That was his nickname. One of the things that he knew that if baseball was integrated, it would kill the Negro Leagues, which it did eventually. It did.
Right,
no question about it. But he watched them. He knew who was good and who wasn't, because he went to those games on Sunday when the team was when his nationals were out of town, and so he saw them play. He saw all those great Negro League ball players come into
Gibson. Gibson played for the Braves, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
Sure.
Josh Gibson and
Josh Gibson, sure. Yeah.
Josh Gibson was a tortured soul. I think he died in his mid-30s. He was an incredible ball player, but he was just a tortured soul. But they did have
to put his skills into comparison.
He was an alcoholic.
They compared Gibson to Campy and Yogi, and they
said, "Oh yeah."
In fact, he was better than those two.
He was supposedly better than both of them. Yeah.
Yeah. Growing up near Yankee Stadium, I always heard the story that Gibson was the only player ever to hit a fair ball out of Yankee Stadium. Now it may not be true.
If he was in the majors, he would have probably hit 70, 80 home runs a year. He was that good.
Yeah, when he wasn't, he wasn't being haunted by these ghosts and things. But supposedly he hit one in a Negro League game at Yankee Stadium out of the ballpark fair, and after they tore it down, of course, nobody could do it ever again. So it's either Gibson did it or no one ever did it.
David, would have that ball gone out of Harris Field in the Bronx?
Not, that was a big field. There were 4 major league size baseball stadiums in that field. So
absolutely.
Maybe down the line, maybe, but not the deep center field. That was about 800 feet away.
Oh, wow. You grew up a Yankee fan.
Yes.
David.
Yes.
And how did it come to you? Well, first, your avocation at the time brought you to Virginia and the Washington area. How were your feelings like when the Yankees came in to play the Senators? What was it like for you? I can equate that with me.
Well, when I got here, they were just about leaving, so I only saw maybe a couple of games at our old RFK Stadium, and I saw a couple of exhibition games later on after the team, the Senators by then, had left for Minneapolis, St. Paul. So I do remember going to a number of Yankees Senators games in Yankee Stadium. They came out for a number of doubleheaders, and they had, as you mentioned earlier, they did have some really good ball players, but they just didn't go anywhere. They were a perennial second division team in an 8-team league.
Absolutely. Illustrated by that terrific play that was later made into a movie.
Damn Yankees. Damn Yankees.
Yeah, it was a book, but it was a book first.
Yeah.
Keep in mind that there's an author behind it. It was called The Year the Yankees Lost the Pennant.
Right.
That was the book. I forget who wrote it, but I remember seeing it on Broadway with what's her name? Not Cheetah Rivera.
Gwen Verdon.
Gwen Verdon.
Gwen Verdon. Yeah. She was in.
And Ray Walston played the devil.
Went to Canada, as a matter of fact.
And Tab Hunter.
Yes, in the movie. He played in the movie version.
Yeah.
He played.
I love the movie.
He played a wonderful part. He wasn't a particularly great actor in the world, but he played that part.
Excellent.
He
Excellent.
resisted her advances.
Yeah, that's right.
I thought he did very well in doing that.
I thought he did.
But you know what?
The whole premise of it.
Yeah. Well, in those days, the Yankees did win every year, just about. But on Broadway, I remember seeing the show on Broadway, and there's a gasp in the show when what's his name? I forget his name. The character who sells his soul to the devil. He sits down.
Joe Hardy? Was it Joe Hardy?
Joe Hardy, yes.
Hardy.
Joe Hardy sits down at his desk on stage, and he starts to pen a letter to his wife. He's leaving, and as he pens and sings this song, his back is to the audience, and when he finishes the letter and turns around, he's a young guy. And
goodbye, old girl. Bye, old girl.
Yeah, that's it. But goodbye, old girl.
Yeah.
That's the song.
Something
and
I have
he did
to tell
that,
you.
but on stage, you don't know how they swapped one actor for another actor. It just was there. I mean, it was in the movies you could do that sort of thing.
In the movie you can do it, right.
But there's a gasp in the audience. I remember distinctly. He's suddenly a young guy. Although I didn't agree with the premise of the show or the movie, but that part stuck in my mind all these years.
I still love some of those songs from that play or movie.
Oh, the songs. You got to have Heart is one.
Got to have Heart, 6 months every year.
Out of every year,
saying you'll never win.
Yeah.
And the actors who played the parts in the movie as well as on the stage, I mean, there was one fellow that really resembled Yogi Berra a lot, and they tried to make them look like the Yankee ball players.
The uniforms were very authentic. I mean, they looked.
Yes, they were.
They were singing. They looked like the Washington Senators in real life. I mean, they were last in the American League, first in your hearts, that kind of thing. But
no, first in war, first in peace, and last in the American League.
Yeah, that's right.
But that predated
the dog, though. And
but that predated that predated the Senators of the 50s when they finished in the second division. That went all the way back to the very beginnings of the American League. That's how the Senators became the Nationals. In 1903, I think it was, they had this long years of losing in the old, I think it was called the International League, but it was and then they transferred into the American League at the start of the American League, and they still lost. So one of the things that ownership did in the very early years was to change the nickname, and the reason nobody knew about the change in the nickname, because if you're talking about uniforms, if you recall, Washington just had a W on the breast and on the cap. There was no mention of the nickname at all anywhere on the uniform. So when they switched from being the Senators to the Nationals, the reporters, and the newspapers always like to get a decent headline in. It's a lot shorter to put in Nats than Senators. So and Nats, N-A-T-S, is in the middle of Senators, and it's the beginning of Nationals.
Abbreviate Senators.
That's true.
No,
it is in the middle of Senators. You're right.
So it's in the because I remember distinctly asking my father, we were at it was a Yankee Senator. I said, why do people keep calling them the Nats? And he said, I don't know, but and if you read some of the old Shirley Povich columns in the Washington Post, he always refers to them as the Nats. And because he started covering them the year they won the World Series. And after that, they were the name, and the Nats and Senators were sort of interchangeable, but no one knew. They didn't sell they didn't sell shirts, and they didn't sell all the paraphernalia that's being sold today. So the fans had no way of knowing when when Povich's columns were then reprinted in the Sporting News out of St. Louis.
Oh, yeah, that was wonderful.
Then he changed, he didn't do it, but the editor over there at the Sporting News changed it to Senators, because he always referred to them as Nationals until in the Post, but they changed it to Senators. So that's why the Senators had so much cachet that the Nats never did. But Phil Wood, who's a real expert on the history of the Washington franchise, sent me some copies of documents showing that the official stationery was the Washington Nationals professional baseball team, and a scorecard from the war years that said Nationals, but nobody paid any attention to it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, amazing how powerful the press was in New York, and how unpowerful they were throughout the rest of the leagues. I contend that if people like Marty Marion had played in New York, he'd be in the Hall of Fame. And if Rizzuto played in St. Louis, for instance, he wouldn't be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
There was something about New York.
Not taking anything away from Rizzuto or even Reese. You could put him in there. They're comparable, but they were helped by the tremendous press, the AP,
the New York press. That's right. Absolutely.
And don't forget, a lot of them were voting members of the Baseball Writers Association, of America Association. So they were the voters. They voted on who was going into the Hall of Fame. Right. The only exception to your rule, and there's always an exception, is Gil Hodges.
Yeah,
he deserves
to be in
he hasn't.
He deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. There's no question about it.
Yeah.
Others, we're talking about Cuba, Minnie Minoso. Deserves
another one. Absolutely.
Yeah. Talk about Cuba. Let me mention this. This is an interesting little anecdote too. In '44, the War Department changed its rules, and originally the Cubans, because there were about 5 or 6 Cubans that playing, as you mentioned earlier, playing for Washington. About 5 or 6 of them were on the team that year in '44. Well, they were given like a visa, or like the H-1B visa. They're arguing about these days, bringing in foreign workers. So they were allowed to come in, and they were able to stay throughout the baseball season. But then they had to go back to Cuba, which was no hardship for them, because that's where they came from. But in about mid-season, sometime around July or so, the War Department, for some unknown reason, decided to change the regulations, and they had plenty of men in the service, but for some reason they decided that anyone who's here playing Major League Baseball would either have to sign up for the draft or go back to Cuba now. And Griffith lost his contingent of Cuban ball players for about two or 3 weeks until another close friend of Griffith here was Major General Louis B. Hershey, who for many years was the head of the Selective Service System, the draft board. And so Griffith...
That's power.
Yes, Griffith got on the phone, and suddenly the War Department changed its rules back again. So back they came, and there's some interesting stories in the book about how difficult it was for a couple of these guys to get back to Washington from Cuba, because trains were being commandeered by troop movements, and airplane service was very erratic. But they did come back in that season.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I'll get off the subject a little bit. Can you, David, tell me a little bit something maybe I don't know about Eddie Yost? Eddie Yost I'm a big Met crazy guy, and Eddie Yost was an original coach in 1962. He, Roger Hornsby, Red Ruffing, Casey was the manager. They had 3 Hall of Famers, future Hall of Famers, on their staff, and they lost 120 games.
I was at the very first Mets game, by the way. I was there when they lost the Pittsburgh Pirates. Yeah. I cut school.
Was at the very first one in '63, and the very first, the home opener when they opened Shea in '64. But they were horrible.
Yeah, but colorful. With cases.
Lovable and horrible, right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
It took.
Ed Kranepool was like their great hope. Ed Kranepool coming out of Monroe High School, right into the majors.
And there was the first banner day. The best banner there said. Is Ed Kranepool's Over the Hill or something like that. He was 20 years old. He had he was a clod. I mean, it was not fast. They had him in right field for a while when they first got him, and he lasted like 18 years.
Yes, he did. He had
And now Ed, I want to put out some good vibes on the internet, is awaiting a kidney transplant.
Oh, is he?
Oh, really?
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, hoping for the best.
I wish him.
Boy,
wish him
the
best of luck,
guys. The more these young guys, Lou Brock has been very ill.
Yes, I know.
Rodney Carew.
Rod Carew's been ill, you know. Although I saw him not too long ago, and he looked pretty good.
But he just had a heart, didn't he? He just had a heart transplant.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. There was an interesting story about. Yeah. There was an interesting human interest story about that, and I forget the details.
Yes.
But the donor.
The donor's family met with Rod Carew. Yeah. It was very emotional.
But that wasn't the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey used to say. There was something in there that Carew and the transplant, the fellow who died, they had some kind of connection briefly years earlier, and I forget what it was. It was on the news.
I don't remember that either.
Yeah, it made a really interesting human event story.
Rod Carew on the list.
He's a wonderful guy. Rod Carew,
his wife is Jewish, and he converted to Judaism.
Judaism, that's right.
I think his mother was Jewish. I think
I don't think so. I think
his
Martin Marion's mother was Jewish.
His wife was Jewish. Yeah.
Oh, maybe that's
he converted to Judaism. He converted to Judaism. Yeah. His first wife. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that can be a
there's an old joke.
Painful thing.
Tell it. What do you call a Gentile? What do you say about a Gentile that converts to Judaism? Goyishakov. What do you say of a Jew that converts to Christianity? Goyishakov.
It's like Sammy Davis went on a bus, and the bus driver says, "Listen, black boy, get to the back." And he says, "No, you don't understand. I'm Jewish." He said, "In that case, get off."
Get off the bus entirely.
Get off the bus. Yeah.
David, do you know of Ron's history of being Jackie Robinson's childhood friend, or he was a child, and Ron carries out the legacy of Jackie's memories?
Yes. Jackie and I were very close. I met him when I was a little boy, and we became the best of friends, and I have all these handwritten letters from him, and we had lunches and dinners together, and he was at my 10th birthday party. Yeah.
Ron, where did this? Was this in California, or was this in?
Well, I grew up in Sheboygan, Wisconsin.
Huh.
And my father was very active in politics. He was the Democratic National Committeeman for the state of Wisconsin, and he used to love the Dodgers because they gave Jackie an opportunity to play Major League Baseball.
Mm-hmm.
So he says to me, "How would you like to meet him someday?" And he wrote him a letter and told him how much I admired him, and he wrote back. And he said next time the club's in Milwaukee playing the Braves, he would love to meet me. At that time, the Atlanta Braves were the Milwaukee Braves.
Right.
And that's how it all started. And he
Oh,
sent
wow.
me a telegram when I graduated from high school, and Major League Baseball did a documentary called Letters from Jackie. Curtis Granderson was the host, about our relationship and our friendship. And I go around the country, I still do, and speak about Jackie and diversity and racial problems. And I also work for the Minnesota Twins part-time. A lot of the tour groups, the kids that go through the stadium, I will speak to them. Matter of fact, I'm speaking on Tuesday again at the stadium. So it's been quite a journey. It's been.
Have you ever run across Professor Richard Zamoff at George Washington University?
Who? Oh yeah. Zamoff. He and I are very close friends. You know him?
Good. Okay, because we just had the Jackie Robinson Project annual gathering. I go to that
every year in October. I go there every year in October.
Oh, the October. Well, see, I go to the one in April. That's coincident.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, I go every. I've done that now for 7 or 8 years.
Okay. Because I thought I'd try to recruit you to his minions.
Yeah, he's a terrific guy. His brother Barry.
We grew up together. We grew up in the same apartment building in the Bronx. Yes, they were the only Brooklyn Dodger fans anywhere.
Yep, that's right. That's right. Barry and Richard Zamoff, terrific.
And I was so jealous when if you recall, there was a Happy Felton's Knothole gang before the Dodger games.
Yeah.
And they got on it, and they got to throw a ball around with Pee Wee Reese or somebody, and they got gloves, and I was so jealous.
Wow.
I mean, even though I wasn't a Dodger fan, that really hurt.
I'm still a Dodger fan.
I was jealous of that show too as a Giant fan because it really humanized the players.
Yes.
It did. Yeah.
They would do interviews with the players and showed you how they related to the kids, the Little Leaguers, Ruth League,
that whole game,
whatever it was. And some of the players would look these guys in the eye, and some of them is just a $20 gift certificate gig, and they could care less. But we were talking about Gil Hodges, and Gil Hodges would put his hand, adjust their stances, their fielding stances. He
worked with the kids a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was a terrific show. Happy Felton was this very, very overweight.
Yes, right.
Announcer
with big, thick glasses.
Yeah.
Thick glasses. They put him in a Dodger uniform.
Yeah, right.
And he just run this thing, and they had 3 kids who would try out, and
and then one would be
one
selected
kid would make it.
Yep. And Richard's house, I was there one time. It's a shrine to the Brooklyn Dodgers. I mean, it's just
of course. Yes, I know.
The museum that they're going to open to Jackie Robinson in Manhattan shortly.
Yes, isn't that fabulous? Yeah.
I've been in touch his house. They should move his house right to.
That's right. Put it right in there. That's right.
Because even the original letter from Happy Felton's organization inviting Barry and Richard to go to the show, they have it. He has it on display.
That's right. I've been in their home in Washington. It's unbelievable.
It is. It truly is.
It's like a Dodger museum. It's fabulous.
Absolutely.
Yeah. They're wonderful people. I'll be there again, God willing, in October again. I come every year, and hopefully, maybe I can meet you then.
Yeah, let me know when it's coming up. I can come downtown.
I will.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that'd be great. That would be great. We'll have to stay in touch.
This has been a terrific episode. I'm really delighted to have you as a guest.
Do you have another minute? I have another great New York story.
Sure.
I got as much time for you as you need.
All right. Again, all of this happened in the 44th season. Somewhere around the middle of the year, Griffith needed a replacement outfielder for a while. So he tried to lure this fellow by the name of Ed Butka, B-U-T-K-A, to come and play for them. And Butka had been a minor leaguer for a number of years, and Griffith knew of him. He was working for the New York City Sanitation Department at the time. And he turned Griffith down because he said he didn't want to jeopardize his pension.
Sure.
So, I mean, can you imagine that today? A guy working for this garbage collector.
Unbelievable. Yeah. Can you imagine today? Yeah.
Yeah. Can you imagine? So Griffith got on the phone with Fiorello LaGuardia, the mayor, and he said, I need this guy. So LaGuardia arranged with the sanitation department to give Butka a leave of absence that wouldn't wouldn't jeopardize his pension. So Butka came down and he played with Washington for about a month, and then he went back.
Interesting.
Yeah, and faded into obscurity after that.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much power Griffith had.
Yes,
just from your anecdotes,
Ralph, you're right. That's
calling people
between Roosevelt
all over the country. Roosevelt.
Yeah, that's right.
LaGuardia.
He actually kept baseball alive.
Yeah, they talked about the ex-mayors of New York when I was a kid, and he was the most prominent when I grew up in the 50s.
Oh, sure.
His memory. Of course, we had Robert Wagner at that time.
Wagner.
Forever.
Right. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
But Griffith really was, he was the cop that kept the game going. I mean, he pulled off all sorts of things that most folks don't know at all. And they had a plaque, they had this wonderful plaque for commemorating Griffith down in Tinker Field in Orlando, where the team used to play spring training.
Right.
And they had this wonderful plaque. Fortunately, my son took a picture of it, and we put it in the book. And I was trying to get it moved because they were going to knock down Tinker Field. It was too close to the football stadium. And I was trying to get interest in getting the plaque to Washington to put it in Nats Park, and I couldn't get anybody interested in it. And subsequently, the plaque was stolen and probably melted down, and that was the end of it. But it was a very nice commemorative plaque for all of his years in baseball and what he gave to the sport. And unfortunately,
who would enjoy your book was Clark Griffith, the grandson, who we've had on the show, who was a good friend of mine. And he's been on our show here. And
you mean Calvin? Calvin's. He's the attorney in Minneapolis, right?
That's right.
He called me. He called me and said, I hear you writing a book. Yeah, I hear you calling my grandfather a racist. I said, no, he's not. You haven't even read the book. This is what I was writing it. He's because he threatened to sue me. And I said, well, why don't you wait till you read the book? Yeah, I did not have a good experience with him. And subsequently, I learned of some of his I won't go into them, but
probably best.
I never heard from him. After that. Yeah. Because Ted Leventhal, Ted Levengood, who did a wonderful biography of Clark Griffith, checked over mine. I asked him to, do a proof on it. And he at first he said, no, you being too. He's not a racist. He didn't do that. That, the other thing. No. And he corrected it. He corrected my mistake. So a lot of people.
What's your next project, David? What do you have?
Besides staying alive, I don't know.
Oh, well, that's a good one. I would recommend that one.
Yes, you reach a certain point, that becomes a project.
Right.
We don't retire just to retire. We retire so that we can make all our medical appointments.
That's right.
Exactly. You couldn't do that when you're working.
No, but actually I am working.
That's right.
I am working full time again.
I know you are.
Yeah, so I don't have another book project in the works yet. I'm thinking of doing a number of articles the way Paul Dixon does for some of the baseball outlets.
Sure.
Based on some of the things that happened in the 40s. because it's really an unknown area.
It is.
It's terra incognita. Too many people just sort of pass over it. I feel kind of foolish when I tell people, read the book, you'll really enjoy it, because I wrote it, but it really is. I enjoyed writing it so much because of the research and the interesting things.
A lot of history, my God, it's a lot of history.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, just remember
this has
David,
been wonderful.
Ego trumps modesty, so don't be ashamed to tell those people how you feel about your book.
Well, apparently it's in the second printing now in paperback, so that's a good sign. Yeah.
That's terrific. Will you come back again and talk to us on the air?
Absolutely.
We'd love
and
it.
If you enjoy,
love it.
And I'd like to talk to you both about different things about your experience with the CIA, David. And
can't tell you anything.
And let's talk stuff that isn't baseball next time.
Okay. That would be fun.
Okay.
That would be
You've
great.
got my number. I'm here.
I do, and I'm delighted. You were terrific, and Ronnie,
Thank you.
This is fun for me. I so much
This was
enjoyed
so
it.
much fun. Yeah.
Good.
It was great.
And
Ralph, could you send me David's
next
number?
week, the week after, George Case will
so I
be
could
back.
stay in touch with him? Yeah.
And
I can. Yeah. Do you have an email? I'll send you Well, wait. Ralph can do that.
Get together through Facebook, guys. You're both on Facebook.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, that's fine.
Okay.
Sure.
We'll do that.
And
I'll friend you or something.
Beautiful.
Sounds great.
And I'll send you a link to the show as I do Ron and George.
Yeah.
Okay. That'd be great.
And I'm going to take you up on your agreement to come back because
that would be great.
Delight, David.
That would be great.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And beautiful, guys.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you again, and we'll catch you next week. Keep on keeping on, everybody. Adios.
Thanks, David. Thanks,
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.